Now, the South African Communist Party is calling for government to consider making the 350 Rand grant permanent. The party has expressed concern about high unemployment rate in South Africa. The unemployment rate is currently at 35.3%. Let's unpack this further with economist Duma Gqubule, who joins us now virtually. Mr. Gqubule, thank you very much for your time here on All Angles. The 350 Rand grant obviously is important in terms of what's happened in our country during COVID, but it surely cannot be a permanent solution to unemployment.
It's not a permanent solution to unemployment. It's a solution to the unprecedented levels of poverty that are a result of the unprecedented levels of unemployment. So South Africa today, we've got unemployment of 46.6%. I don't use the official definition. The expanded definition that Stats SA talks about is 46.6% unemployment. For African people, it's 51%, and for African females, 55.7%. We also have high levels of poverty. So half the population lives in households that are in poverty, the upper poverty line of 1,300 rands a month. And about a third of households live in households that are below what's called the lower poverty line of 890 a month. And a fifth of 1 in 5 people live below the food poverty line. And we also saw situations, surveys show about 20% of South Africans live in households where they are either hungry every day or they go with hunger. So we can't ask the people to wait until the government delivers employment. We have to provide an immediate humanitarian situation now, because there was a survey last year that showed that 10 million people and 3 million children went hungry, and women were more likely to protect women and their children from hunger, and they would sacrifice a meal so that the children would actually eat the food. So we have to address this immediate humanitarian crisis. I think so. I think we have no choice. If we had managed our economy properly, we wouldn't be talking about such a situation. Yeah.
So you agree then with the SACP that this should be made permanent, or are you saying it should be extended till as far as we can reach? Because I would think that there are other ways that we can, assist with the unemployment rate in our country.
This is not about unemployment, it's about poverty in South Africa, where half of the population lives in poverty, and there's no prospect of jobs based on the current economic policies. So what we're saying is that there's a campaign and civil society for a basic income grant. So the problem with the 350, it's not linked to any objective measure of poverty. So as I said, there are 3 poverty lines in South Africa. The food poverty line is 624. So this 350 should be increased to the food poverty line. So because the 350 doesn't even allow people to address food poverty. So we must have it at 624, and we've been saying that it must be phased in over 3 years towards the upper poverty line of 1,300 rands here.
I was actually going to speak to you about the basic income grant, because what the SACP is saying is that the 350 Rand should be made permanent to address unemployment. That's sort of their solution to the figures that were released last week. But I should think that the basic income grant...
Well, it doesn't address unemployment. So when we have a basic income grant at a high enough level, it stimulates the economy, and people spend the money in communities. El Dorado Park, Khayelitsha. So it creates jobs, and so in South Africa right now, our GDP growth forecast for the next 5 years is 1.5% a year, according to the World Bank and the IMF. So what we're saying is that people must understand that what we need to do in terms of, if we have this basic income grant, it's going to bring our growth rate higher than it would have been in the absence of the stimulus to the economy, and it will create I did the modeling, it will create a few million jobs over the period of implementation. But on top of that, in terms of the unemployment crisis, I'm arguing we should expand public employment schemes through a job guarantee. And I've looked at some of the government's public employment schemes. Their scale is too small, and I'm saying that let's provide full-time jobs instead of part-time jobs in public employment, and a target over the next 5 years of about 5 million jobs. So there are many ways in which we can address the unemployment, the poverty, and the inequality. And we mustn't forget about the inequality as well. There was a survey a few years ago that showed a study that shows 10% of South Africans own 90% of wealth. Recently, the World Bank said 10% of South Africans own about 86% of financial assets. So we've got this, we have to address all of these things simultaneously: unemployment, the poverty, and the inequality. And there are very many ways in which we can do that if the government was prepared to listen to lots of proposals that have come from many economists, civil society organizations, but the government is not interested in listening to these proposals.
And I think a lot of people take up issue with exactly that, Mr. Gqubule, that there's been so much advice, but none of it is taken. And if you listen to what the finance minister said during his budget speech, he said that they cannot implement the basic income grant in a fiscally irresponsible way. So I would assume that maybe if he listens to your advice today, maybe he should consider making the basic income grant something that is top of his agenda right now? The implementation
of the basic income grant. Yeah, the basic income grant, when it is supported by other means to create jobs, it's the fiscally responsible thing to do, because it's going to get our country growing. Now, what I want to say is that the people who object to the proposals we make about getting our economy going, they must give other alternatives, because on this trajectory, we just before COVID, we came out of a lost decade when our economy didn't grow. And since December 2008, we've lost about 200,000 jobs. And the labor force has increased by about 6.3 million. So the number of unemployed people have increased by about to 12.5 million people. And I've modeled that on this trajectory, we're heading towards 17 million jobs, people unemployed by 2030. So if you're going to give me an alternative, how to stimulate the economy, I think we don't have another year to get this economy right. We've got to start coming up with proposals immediately.
Very scary forecast there. Thank you very much for speaking to me here on All Angles. That is, of course, economist Duma Gqubule there.